Hitting the Road is proudly sponsored by...
Some bears spend a lot of time preparing their dens for winter. Others just unpack, settle in, and snooze. Learn more about Sleepy Bear's story at travellodge.com.
As well as contributions from G.E. Johnson Construction Company, Charles J. Murphy, Gray Line of Colorado, Laura and Brian Markovich, Elham and Edward Ketchum, Wendy and Mark Pfeiffer, and viewers like you. When I think about Colorado, I think about hiking and skiing and mountains. But there is something else that's enjoying a growth in popularity. I'm Donna Vesey, your adventurista, and on this episode of Hitting the Road, we're going to examine the grape and see how Colorado vintners are pressing the competition.
I'm hitting the road again, got adventure crawling under my skin, going places that I've never been. I'm hitting the road, I'm hitting the road again, gonna take along all of my friends, living life like it's just no end. I'm hitting the road, feeling better since I don't know when. I'm hitting the road.
We begin our journey harvesting grapes in Cortez, Colorado. Then it's off to Denver to speak with an author and wine connoisseur. From there, we'll press on to Boulder, Colorado, and crush some grapes without even getting barefoot. Then we spirit on to Evergreen, Colorado, and hear from the Colorado Wine Industry Development Board. And finally, we'll meet an enthusiastic winemaker who will change the way you think about a glass of wine. Cheers! It's a sweet time of year in Cortez, Colorado, where Guy Drew Vineyards is bringing in the harvest.
We grow on this particular vineyard, we're growing Cabernet Sauvignon, Riesling, and Chardonnay. And we have a number of other vineyards, and we grow other Bordeaux varietals, Chardonnay, another Riesling vineyard up on the north side of the valley.
How old is this vineyard?
This vineyard is 5 years old.
It only took 5 years to get this many grapevines?
Well, we planted it all in 1 year. Well, actually, we planted it over 2 years, but 80% of it the first year, and then the second year we planted the other 20%. This vineyard is 10.5 acres. There's 4 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon, 4 acres of Riesling, and 2.5 acres of Chardonnay.
So it takes about 5 years for a vineyard to become mature.
For a vineyard to be mature, you really need 5 crops.
So what is it about the soil and the temperature here in the Four Corners region that is making such good grapes?
You know, the difference here from the rest of the state, and if you look at our dirt, we have this red dirt. Mm-hmm. And the red dirt around here blew in from Monument Valley 10,000 years ago. And so there are other kinds of soil, and the red dirt to me isn't the only dirt you want to plant on, but it seems to me to be the best. It holds water capacity very well. You know, the history of this area with, you know, there's Mesa Verde and the ancient Puebloans that were here, they grew, you know, they were here and grew food for over 800 years. And they didn't have irrigation either. And we took their lead on where they planted, and those are the first sites that we seek out, or at least that's a good indicator that, you know, that it's a viable location. This crop is probably 4 to 5 tons an acre. The Cabernet Sauvignon crop, it's probably 1.5 to 2 tons this year. It should be 4 to 5 tons an acre next year. So these are not quite as ripe. They're about 21 bricks currently. I'd like to get another 2-3 bricks out of them.
So you're going to leave them hang a few more days?
Maybe even another 2 weeks.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So how long is it going to take a group of people, and how many people will it take to go through this vineyard?
We'll probably have 12 people picking here, and we're actually picking into 3 other places simultaneously, so they're, you know, smaller crews. At the other ones, they're not as big an acreage as this. I'm a firm believer that this area down here, the Four Corners region, and particularly the Montezuma Valley, is going to be a world-class wine growing region.
In our quest to uncork the history of Colorado wines, we popped into the home of author and wine connoisseur Paula Mitchell in Denver, Colorado. Paula set out on her own personal journey. What made you want to write a guidebook about Colorado wineries?
Well, actually, it stemmed from a personal need. I had been studying wine and tasting a lot of wine from all over the world, and I really wanted to taste my own state's wine. So I went to the library and bookstores to try and find a guidebook to help me go out to the various wineries, and there wasn't a guidebook written. So I thought, well, I guess I'll write my own. So I traveled around to the various wineries and got their information and wrote my own book. Historians know that grapes were grown and wine was made in the late 1800s. At that time, there was a lot of European immigrants that went into the Grand Valley to work the mines, and they brought with them their tradition of winemaking, wine drinking, so there was really a demand for wine at that time. Also back then, Governor Crawford, planted 60 acres of grapes in the Grand Valley. So grape growing and winemaking really started to flourish at that time. But then, as we all know, Prohibition happened. And so at that time, most of the grapevines were ripped out and the fruit trees were planted. The good thing about that was we have our famous Palisade peach now.
How long after Prohibition did Colorado farmers start to grow grapes?
It was really about 50 years. It was in the late 1960s. It wasn't until 1978 that 12 financial investors and a grape farmer or a grape grower got together and formed Colorado Mountain Vineyards. And that's when Colorado, or present-day Colorado, started making wine and using Colorado grapes. Statistically, the number of wineries back in 1990 was quite small. There was only 5 licensed wineries in our state. 10 years later, there were only 30 wineries in our state. And it's really been in the last 5 to 10 years that Colorado's wine industry has really expanded. And today we have 110 licensed wineries in our state.
That is amazing. What's the most popular area in Colorado to grow grapes?
We actually have 2 very popular areas to grow grapes. Most people think of the Grand Valley as the number 1, which encompasses Grand Junction and Palisade. We actually have another area called the West Elks AVA, which consists of Hotchkiss and Paonia.
What are the best grapes growing in Colorado?
Colorado has about 6 grapes that they grow very, very well. Our 3 reds are Cabernet Franc, which would actually be our signature grape if Colorado had a signature grape. And we also grow Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah are the reds. And for whites, we grow Riesling, Viognier, and Chardonnay, and those are the best Colorado grapes.
Do you think about a glass of wine differently now that you've written this book?
It really does take a lot of effort to make a glass of wine, and a lot of people, yes, they don't understand the whole process. It's not just the winemaker, it's also the grape grower. So you've got to have good grapes, and then the whole fermentation process and all that's involved in aging. And it's all about the grapes, and it's all about what the winemaker does to make that special wine.
I'm a person who wants to know more about Colorado wines. What's my first step?
Your first step is to get out there and visit the wineries. That's the best way to be able to taste and sample Colorado wines. And a lot of people think, especially here along the Front Range, that they have to travel over to Palisade to taste wine, and that's not true. And actually, there are more wineries from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs than there are over in the Palisade area. Wineries in Colorado are very welcoming. They want people to come and visit their winery, taste their wine, and enjoy it and hopefully buy a bottle or two. But I think the one great thing about Colorado wineries is the ability to travel around our state. So what better way to enjoy all the activities that our state has to offer than stop at a winery or two and enjoy some Colorado wine? I think people would be pleasantly surprised.
And one of those pleasant surprises is John Garlick at the Bookcliff Vineyards in Boulder, Colorado. And what made you decide to get into winemaking?
I love it. You know, it's just fantastic. All the different variables of making wine and how the complexity of wine and the whole process. I'm a process person. I like growing things. I like things, developing things. I like blending, you know, and all those are aspects of winemaking. And I got started as a hobbyist and it kind of developed from there. Yeah, I think it's really important for us when we got started to grow our own grapes. So we did not start the actual winery process or winemaking process until we had our own grapes. So we started with our own vineyard from scratch, and I think for us that really determines the quality of the grapes is how it's treated in the vineyards. We're not certified organic, but we use a lot of organic methods. And so we like to keep the soil alive. You know, we like to using the compost and not using pesticides or herbicides kind of provides a more living soil or organisms in the soil. It doesn't hurt them. And I think that's really important for growing good grapes. It provides another energy to the vine, and it shows up in the fruit.
All your grapes are grown out in Palisade, you said, correct?
Yeah, we grow all our grapes in Palisade. So we started the vineyard first. That was one of the first things we started with 18 years ago. And it took a while to get the grapes growing. We started with an old peach orchard and converted it. So 3 years later, then we started the winery, because at that point we started getting grapes.
So walk me through the process of the crush. The grapes are unloaded from the truck, and then what happens?
So we unload from the truck, we stage the grapes. They come in picking bins from the vineyard itself. So we have the large picking bins, they get staged, and then we load them into a cradle that we then dump into a sorting table. And we sort through, pull out everything that we don't want, and it drops down into a destemmer crusher, it's called. And that's a machine that basically takes out the stems. It's got a series of paddles that spin very quickly, knocks the grapes through holes in a large cylinder, and the grapes go out one direction, the stems go out another direction. So the grapes then are dropped down into a pump, which then are pumped either to a fermentation bin that we use for red grapes, or into our press directly for white grapes, and we get pressed right away. So the white grapes then get pressed into a tank, the juice goes into a tank, it settles for a day, and then the next day we come in and do what's called racking. We pump the wine from one tank to the other, and that leaves behind the sediment and things that we don't want in the wine. And then we add the yeast and it ferments. These are Merlot grapes that we brought in last week, and for the red grapes we de-stem, take the stems out, and crush the grapes a little bit so the juice starts flowing, and we put them in the bins, and they ferment in the bins for about a week. And during that process, CO2 is produced, and it pushes the skins to the surface, so you can see all the bubbles. And what we're doing is pushing the skins back down into the wine, because that's where all your color and flavor is in the skins. So you're just trying to get that color and flavor out of the skins. And so we do this initially when we first put the grapes in, they'll soak for a couple days. It's called the cold soak. And then we'll start the fermentation. We'll add yeast, and it'll slowly get started. So then these will be taken after the fermentation is almost complete. We'll put these skins into a press and press the juice out, or the wine at that point. And that'll go into these tanks behind us. It goes into the fermentation tank. We Next day we rack it off, siphon the wine basically off the sediment on the bottom, and then we add yeast. And so it'll ferment for anywhere from 10 to 20 days. Because the white wine we actually ferment in a cold environment. We chill the tank down. And that preserves more of the fruit character of the vine and provides a slower fermentation, which enhances the flavors of the white wine.
How long does it take once it's fermented before it's bottled?
Right, so the length of time from fermentation to bottling, for Riesling it's fairly quickly. We can crush the grapes in September or October and be bottled in December. Some of the other varieties will take a little longer for the white wine, but generally they'll be bottled by early spring.
And red wines take a lot longer?
Yeah, the red wines take longer. We like to age those in oak, so oak barrels, and so we'll ferment, settle out in the tank, let the fermentation finish, and it'll go into barrels at that point. And so the barrels are different varieties of oak and from different parts of the world. It'll age in those barrels for anywhere from 6 months to 18 months, and then go back to tank for blending and then bottle. So for red wines, it can be as long as 2 years before you'll see it in the bottle.
What advice would you give somebody who wanted to become a winemaker?
Okay, I'd say the best advice for people wanting to get into the business is to learn as much as possible before you actually start the business.
Do you go to school?
Yeah, so I went to school. I went to school to learn winemaking at UC Davis, and you want to make sure that you get as much as possible the knowledge before you commit to a lot of dollars and time to actually running a business, winemaking business.
Michelle Cleveland is a winemaker at the Creekside Cellars in Evergreen, Colorado, and also an instructor of enology at Metropolitan State University in Denver.
Well, I've always had a passion for wine. I grew up in a family that enjoyed wine, a German family, so a lot of Rieslings, as you can imagine. But then as I got older and moved to Colorado, I met the owner actually here at the winery and told him that one day I was very interested in making wine and I was going to quit my job and I wanted to work hand in hand with him. So back in 2005, I resigned from my job and I started as a volunteer and kind of worked my way up, enrolled in a program through UC Davis in enology and viticulture, and then took over the winemaking here at Creekside back in 2007, 2008.
And you've done everything. You've planted,
Yeah, I planted the vineyard. The vineyard manager thought I was crazy, but it's important to me to get to know every aspect of winemaking so that I can communicate that to our customers. You know, most people don't realize what goes into a glass of wine, okay? And I planted a vineyard. Last spring installed an irrigation system, helped in that project. In the morning, this morning actually, unloaded grapes from the western slope. Got up at 3 a.m., was here to unload at 4:30 in the morning. So there's a lot that goes into winemaking, and for me, knowing every single aspect of it is important.
And tell me about your wines in competition. Are you winning?
Are we winning? That's an understatement. So yes, I like to talk about Colorado wines and the awards that they're winning, because not only are we winning the awards, but the wineries throughout the industry are winning awards. And these aren't just your county fair or your state fair competitions. These are double-blind international competitions. San Francisco International Wine Competition, Finger Lakes, Dallas Morning News, Denver International Wine Competitions. We are competing not just within Colorado, but outside of Colorado, Oregon, Washington, California. And we are winning double golds, golds, silvers, bronzes. So we can keep up with them.
That is fabulous.
Yeah,
So
it's exciting.
you said these are double-blind tastes?
These are all double blind. So for example, my Malbec won a double gold at San Francisco. What does that mean? That means that 2 sets of judges from 2 sets of tables gave that wine a gold medal. They all had to give it a gold medal. Okay, so if one of those judges, let's say there's 4 judges at this table and 4 judges at this table, if one of those judges would have given that wine a silver, it wouldn't have won the double gold. Okay, so that means that wine was tasted twice. okay, and they don't know where it comes from, all they typically know is the variety. And sometimes it's even broken down for price point. So for a winery to win a double gold, that's a big deal.
What advice would you tell any person who came to you and said, I want to be a winemaker? Where would you send them?
The first thing that I would tell them would be to find a winery. It wouldn't have to be in Colorado. Find a region that you enjoy and that you could have time and money and move there and experience the making of the wine. And then once you got maybe a year or two under your belt as far as experience, hands-on, then definitely I'm all for the education side of it. I think you need both. I think that's one of the key ingredients of a good winemaker, is not only the hands-on but also the educational background.
Doug Caskey, Executive Director of the Colorado Wine Industry Development Board, explains how they're promoting Colorado wines.
We have a website, coloradowine.com. We've just launched mobile apps for both the Apple iOS and the Android platform, and those are available from our website. We do a lot of tastings around the state, just because we found the best way to get people interested in Colorado wine is to put it in their mouth.
Are there festivals, wine festivals?
There's two big wine festivals that are Colorado, well, there's several that are Colorado only, but two main ones. The Colorado Urban Wine Fest, which is the first weekend in June in Glendale, and the Colorado Mountain Wine Fest, which is the third weekend of September in Palisade. Those are the two that are done by our industry.
So festivals are generally a good place to go and
find wine. That's true. I mean, some of the
wine.
big festivals can be kind of a zoo, but you know, it's a much more festive atmosphere. But that's a great place to go and sample wines from many different wineries. If it is a Colorado-only festival, then our wineries have a license that they can invoke to sell directly to consumers at the event. That doesn't happen for out-of-state wineries. You know, does Colorado wine compete with wines from other parts of the country and the world? In the sense that, you know, is our quality and our value as good as a wine from California? I actually think it's better. My guess is you're going to be happier with the Colorado wine most of the time. I think, you know, you look at our results from national competitions. We have many, many national awards and best of shows and best of categories. About 10 years ago, we actually won the International Riesling competition. The best Riesling in the world was from Colorado.
Wow.
So yes, we absolutely compete, and I think the value is here. I think we compete brilliantly and very successfully.
There is one aspect of enjoying wine that many of us take for granted.
So wine is emotional.
So it's a living, breathing thing.
It certainly is, through its entire life cycle, from vine to glass. It's important that, you know, wine drinkers understand that shape, size of the bowl is going to influence all of those sensory attributes in our nose and our mouth, okay? So wine glasses look at about four things. So bouquet, okay? So if we swirl a glass, we smell it. Okay, those are the aromas.
Okay.
And then when we drink it, okay, we're looking at the texture. Okay, so the mouthfeel. We're also going to recognize flavors, so minerality, the fruit, the acidity, and then on the finish, how does it finish in our mouth, on our palate? Is it seamless, harmonious? And glassware will affect all of that.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. So right here I've got, this is a Burgundy glass, so I've got a Chardonnay in there. This glass here is what I use for like my Syrah or my Rhone blends. This is more of a like a Sauv Blanc or a Viognier or a Riesling style glass, okay? Those are very aromatic wines, so a little tighter. And then this is my big red glass, okay? And red wines are typically a little tighter, right? More tannin. And this big bowl is going to just release some of those aromatics with the size of this bowl here, which a big red wine needs. Okay.
Okay.
And you can do a test and pour this same wine into this glass, and it's night and day different. It's night and day different. It is. It really is. And so glass is important, especially if you're in the industry and you are a winemaker. You want your wines to appeal to the customers as best as they can. I don't want my red wine in this tight glass right here. It's not going to show well. And it's not going to present it. I want it to breathe, yeah. So if I can show it as best as I can, this is what I'm going to do.
The next time you have a glass of wine, think about the time, the effort, and the passion that went into it, and then you will have cause for celebration. Hitting the Road is proudly sponsored by...
Some bears spend a lot of time preparing their dens for winter. Others just unpack, settle in, and snooze. Learn more about Sleepy Bear's story at travellodge.com.
As well as contributions from G.E. Johnson Construction Company, Charles J. Murphy, Gray Line of Colorado, Laura and Brian Markovich, Elham and Edward Ketchum, Wendy and Mark Pfeiffer, and viewers like you.